All right, nerds, gather around. Here we go again. It's Swing Thoughts.
You get a shiver in the dark. It's raining in the park.
Along with Coach Tim, I'm golf spiritual leader. That's right. That's what I call myself, Annie. And he's like, what? I didn't know there was... No, it's like you should never give yourself your own nickname. We have a very fine guest here. We're going to get to her in a second. But first, Tim and I welcome you on behalf of TaylorMade, the #1 driver in golf. I have tested the new clubs this week for the first time. GSL is coming to you from Palm Springs, California. You just were talking about shoveling snow, man. I forgot you guys got snow.
And a lot of it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I had to, I shoveled 2 driveways today, got my workout in.
Attaboy.
And I had to dig out and unthaw my niece's car. It was mild here, and then it got really freaking cold. Yeah. So the door handle locked. So I had to trudge home, put the kettle on, walk down the laneway with my kettle, pour it on the door handle, and dig it out and do all that. So
I love that meme that's like, tell me you're Canadian without telling me you're Canadian. I have to boil water to unlock my door. I was going to tell you, well, listen, we have a great show for you. I got to try the TaylorMade clubs. We're going to talk about that. There's lots of golf stuff on the show today. Of course, Jonathon Wong Apparel. You look great in your, what is that? Freedom.
This is my zero
restrictions.
Pullover, I think they're called.
Very nice.
And I think it's blue.
It's funny. I often we talk about how golfers will begin a round in this state of hopefulness, and Canadians are like that. Every year, Canadians think this will be the year that winter passes us by. And then, in Toronto, we don't get a lot of snow or winter until like early January. And all of a sudden, like, what? It found us again? With golfers, we all start every round hopeful that maybe today will be the day that nothing bad happens. And then, of course, the first hole, you smother hook it into a bunker. And there's your game again. Today, I was saying to my partner that, over the course of 187 or 8 shows, we've had 10 or 15 or so, you'd know better than I, non-sort of golf-specific interviews that I think are among our most interesting. And I think today will be no exception. Our guest today is an acclaimed science writer whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Scientific American, and the Best American Science Writing, among many other publications. She's the author of Origins, The Cult of Personality, and her latest book is called The Extended Mind. And you're thinking, what does that have to do with golf? Well, please welcome to our program, Annie Murphy-Paul, and let's find out. Hello, Annie.
Oh, thank you, Howard. Hi, nice to be here. I was wondering that too, but we'll figure it out.
Well, let us tell you what, Coach Tim and I, let us find the way in. But first, welcome. And Tim, thanks for setting this up. I had a chance to look through the book. But why don't you start? This was your find. How does Annie's work relate to what we do and how we talk about golf?
Well, we have talked on this show for a long time about the thinking part of golf is the way that a lot of people approach the game. They think about having to swing the correct way, swing the right model. If they do all the right things, which are largely things they think about, golf will work out just fine and no bad things will happen. But it's our experience, both as players, coach, GSL's now a coach himself, is that what we don't do is give enough credit to our body and to the wisdom in our body and its ability to do pretty incredible things, whether it's walk down a set of stairs or hit a golf ball. So when I came across your book, I just dove right in and I just resonated big time in terms of our bodies have, there's so much innate talent, skill, experience there that I thought this could be a great conversation to have. So that's kind of my general intro about how this could apply to golf. But maybe, Annie, the place to start is, why don't you just give us sort of the nuts and bolts of your main thesis of your book and perhaps how it may how it may relate to what I just talked about in terms of golf.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that intro, Tim. So the extended mind is actually not my idea. It's an idea that I borrowed from philosophy, these two philosophers, Andy Clark and David Chalmers. And in 1998, they published an article called The Extended Mind. And the first line of that article really grabbed me. It said, "Where does the mind stop and the rest of the world begin?" And I think we might imagine that has a pretty obvious answer, that the mind stops at the skull. The mind is the brain, right? But Clark and Chalmers were arguing that no, actually, the mind extends beyond the head, beyond the skull, into the rest of our body, as you were mentioning, Tim, into our physical surroundings, into our relationships with other people, into our tools, including golf clubs, I assume. And what they were arguing essentially was that it's wrong, it's mistaken to think that to imagine that thinking only happens in the brain, that the brain is the sole locus of thinking. In fact, we think with all the stuff of the world, including our own bodies. And in writing about the extended mind in my own book, I drew on a very well-developed area of research in psychology known as embodied cognition. And this is the idea that we think with our bodies, that to imagine that thinking only happens sort of above the neck is really mistaken, is really inaccurate. And there's so many ways in which the body, its movements, its sensations, its gestures really informs and extends and enhances our thinking. But we do have this notion in our culture, in our Western culture, that mind and body are separate and maybe even opposed, but that's really a misconception that we want to get past, I think, if we want to perform at our best.
Well, it's fascinating. I just read in the beginning of in the notes about the extended mind, and I went through some of the notes last night, and it's all fascinating to us as golfers because any time you're performing a complex, complicated series of movements, you wonder how people who perform at a high level, Olympic athletes doing complicated figure skating, or astronauts bringing a space shuttle back to Earth, there has to be a point where the thinking ends, or the sort of cognitive thinking ends, and some kind of environmental, or as you say, extraneural resource starts to come into play, because there are things that human beings do every day that have nothing to do with how you think about it. And as Tim said in the intro, a lot of golfers get into trouble because they think they're supposed to be thinking, when in actual fact, there are environmental and physical sort of intelligences in play.
Right.
And is that
Right.
part of what you talk about?
It is. And I think you're absolutely right, Howard, that we get into trouble sometimes when we think too much, when we're too much in our conscious minds, because there's so much intelligence that resides in those processes that are not conscious, that are embodied, that are influenced by the way we arrange our environment, and to really perform at our best, whether that's learning or working or playing golf. It's smart to think in terms of thinking outside the brain. How can I arrange or move my body in a way that supports peak performance? How can I arrange my environment, my context, that's in a way that supports peak performance, rather than thinking that it's the brain that has to do it all?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I found so fascinating about your work is that in many ways, what we're trying to do in our world is adapt to it. And our brains, basically their job, I'm not sure if its basic job is keep us alive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always adapting to this environment. And to me, in terms of golf, it's, we've got basically the challenge ahead of us. There's, maybe some water here. There's a sand bunker here and a green. And so our bodies kind of have to figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the danger that what most people get is, if I swing this way, if I do this with my right elbow, it'll cause this to happen. And I think that discounts the wisdom of the body to figure it out. Is that kind of what we're talking about around the extended mind?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I write about in the book is the process of automation, making very well practiced movements and activities automatic, so that we don't have to think about them consciously anymore. And this is what characterizes the behavior of an expert, and it actually can make it quite difficult for an expert to teach a novice, because they're what they do has become so well practiced and so embedded in their non-conscious mind that it's actually hard for them to explain exactly what they're doing. They leave out a lot of things because they're no longer really aware of what they're doing, and that's what you want as an expert. It just makes it difficult to teach a novice.
Well, you know,
Kind of like my grade 7 math teacher.
True.
Well, that too, yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because some of the best coaches in sports history were not experts at the actual activity.
Not the Wayne Gretzky's of the world.
Because to be an expert, as you say, it's hard to put yourself in the mind and body and the experience of a Tiger Woods or a Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan. And yet, and so again, the best coaches, the best mentors are often people that are experts at explaining the activity. I want to talk a little bit, because I know, muscle memory is a thing that comes into sports, and people talk about it in certain, again, high level activities. And one of the first things you say is, we tell our, use your head. That's what we tell ourselves when facing a tricky problem or difficult project. But doesn't well, first of all, I want you to comment on what your thoughts on muscle memory are. And then secondly, because Tim and I take turns asking questions, so I'm going to ask a second question. So talk about muscle memory. And doesn't the brain have to, in as Tim's example, assess the environment and then give the body some instruction?
Well, that's how we imagine it happens, and that's that kind of top-down, brain first process. But in fact, it's not really always how it does happen. And I think the fact that we imagine that the brain is always calling the shots and always leading the way is a reflection of what you might call our neurocentric culture, that really kind of idealizes and elevates the brain above everything else, including above the body's wisdom. Because in fact, our emotions and our physical impulses, those travel on pathways in the body that are faster than conscious thought. And if you think about it, the brain is sort of locked in this dark room of the skull.
Mine is, for sure. It's so dark.
It's so dark in there. Yeah. And it only knows what's going on in the outer world or in the body from these impulses that are being sent to the brain. And then from those inputs, the brain makes sense of what it thinks is going on. And that's when the conscious processes kick in. But in fact, the body's been responding and acting and, performing in the world before the brain really even has an idea of what's going on. So that's why if we're startled, for example, we might start running, or our heart might start beating before we even have a sense of what's happened. All of that's happened first. And then the brain figures it out and says, oh, I'm afraid, and then it constructs a feeling out of these the basic building blocks of bodily reaction. So really, it's the body that is leading the way rather than the brain.
And so talk a little bit, if you can, about my question to golfers listening, saying, well, what about muscle memory? Are there, because there's a lot of debate about if in fact muscles have memories, or are the memories stored in the brain and the signals sent to the muscles to fire the activity?
Yeah. Well, the brain is central. I don't want to suggest that I'm arguing that we can do any of our thinking without the brain. It's just a question of when does the brain come into the process, and what is the role that it's playing? Is it calling all the shots? Is it the dictator that kind of tells everything and every part of the body what to do, or is it actually kind of lagging behind? I think, muscle memory is a colloquial way of talking about how we have these motor programs that once they're overlearned, they're learned really, really well, they become automatic, and then the conscious mind is not involved anymore. And in a sense, that's what we want to let those non-conscious processes take over, because when we, as we know, when we start overthinking, when we analyze ourselves too closely, when we get too self-conscious, that's when we choke and mess up. We actually want to get out of our own way as much as possible.
Yeah, I think a key thing what we're talking about here is there we have a mind and we have a brain, and the brain, really everything happens in the brain, but it's connected to this body. It makes our hair grow, it keeps our heart beating, all that kind of good stuff. The mind is a different thing, particularly with the prefrontal cortex. That's where the thinking happens, the ego, all that good stuff. That's, the thinking that comes. So we are talking about the brain, but the mind is a different thing in terms of our thoughts. But I want to bring this, say, to a concrete example of what golfers often face. They're standing, say, in the fairway, they have a shot, and they've looked at, okay, it's 165 yards, the wind is doing this, I want to do this. So they've gathered the data and they've made a decision about the shot they're going to hit, the shape it's going to be, etc. But they get over the ball and they just feel uncomfortable. What's happening there, Annie, in terms of what the brain is doing in that moment, in terms of it's relating to what the information that we have, but there seems to be, but we've made this decision, but the body's kind of uncomfortable.
In a situation like that, Tim, do you think it's the body that is correct, and it's the brain that's second guessing the body in an unfortunate way?
I think that what's happening.
So I can't quite picture this scenario, but I want to.
Okay, no, it's a good. It's really cool. I think this actually, by going down this road, it'll help explain it a little bit more. So we've made a decision, our intellectual decision, what the shot we're going to hit. But let's say we get there and we're uncomfortable, and then we kind of notice, oh, I'm going downhill here, and there's actually more wind than I thought. And to me, it's the body that's taking in that information, but we have to listen to it.
I see. Yes. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. One way of thinking about this is that we take in so much information as we go about our daily lives, as we walk through a golf course. We're taking in so much information, so much stimuli that's way too much for our conscious minds to process. Yet we are processing it on a non-conscious level. We're noticing patterns and regularities, and we're making connections to experiences that we've had before. But all of that's going on a non-conscious level. And the way that we get in touch with that knowledge, that wisdom that we actually do have, but we're not consciously aware of, is the body. It's the body that's with its signals and its cues, that sense you were mentioning, that like maybe this isn't, the intellectual decision I made isn't quite right. That's the body kind of tapping us on the shoulder or tugging us on the sleeve, saying, we've got some information to share here.
Right.
And
so you have a feeling. There's a feeling that you have.
Exactly.
Is that called introception?
Interoception. Yeah. And so what's so important is that we learn to tune into that internal sense, because so often our culture tells us, push that aside, lead with your brain, intellectualize what you're doing. But when we do that, we're ignoring this vast sort of trove of experience and wisdom that we have. So we really want to tune into that interoceptive faculty, which just means a gut feeling, I was going to say, of what's going on inside your body.
We sometimes will mock, our spidey sense, or maybe not, or override our intuition. Like we've all met people who we instantly like you, and people who we don't vibe with in media, and sometimes we override that feeling in our bodies. But it turns out that our body has wisdom. Yeah. A lot of the golfers who have gotten to the 19-minute of this interview are going, "This is great, but how does this impact my golf game?" And right. That's just the obsessive nature of golfers. And I wanted to say, there's so much in this book. Part of it is when you talk about two things, about exercise, regulating emotions, which I want to get to at some point. But how do we learn? And can it be learned to use your extended mind, and golfers say in the game of golf, or in your everyday life?
Yes, it can be learned. And yet it's not something that we really focus on, obviously, in school, or I'm not sure how much it comes into golf instruction, but it belongs there. This cultivation of our ability to tune into those internal signals. We are a very visually focused species, and there's often so much visual stimuli coming at us from the outer world that we forget that there's a whole inner world. This flow of sensation and feeling that's there all the time. And when we can bring a kind of open-minded, curious, non-judgmental attention, this is like a mindfulness practice, to those internal sensations, we realize, oh my gosh, there's a whole world in there. There's a whole life, a whole stream of life that's going on in there that is really helpful for me to tap into, but it's so easy to ignore that in the rush of all the stimulation around us on the outside.
Yeah, because in this world, particularly now, obviously with the internet and these phones that we're just addicted to, all this information constantly coming at us, which in our thinking mind. And one of the things I found very fascinating in your book was how movement helps us, in fact, think better.
Yeah.
You had the examples of, I think, a philosophy prof who conducts his classes by walking around the campus and talking, or people doing exercises on a treadmill versus those who were sitting at a desk. And the people who were moving generally outperformed. And so I think that one of the things that we can relate to golf and what we're talking about, this extended mind, is hey, folks, tune into how you're moving.
Right.
Yes.
To what's actually happening in your body, instead of, as you talked about, this top-down thing that my mind is going to tell my body what to do. And I think we're disregarding all this amazing wisdom that could be coming from basically up, if you will.
Yes.
But Annie, before you answer, Annie and Tim, it's an old concept. There's a famous saying, and maybe you've heard it, Annie. It's a Roman saying, through walking, all things are solved. And it's a concept that goes back thousands of years, the idea that awareness is curative, and that movement, walking, going on a walk can solve. You're in a fight with somebody, you go on a walk, you come back, things seem different. And that's, in your book, you talk about exercise regulating emotions.
Yeah, it is something that we know and human beings have known for centuries. On the other hand, we also have this very pervasive notion that real thinking happens when you're still. If you need to do some real serious thinking, you sit down and you're still. But in fact, human beings evolved to think and move at the same time. All these activities that formed our human intelligence, like foraging and hunting, were cognitively demanding, and they were physically demanding at the same time. And that's what gave birth to our unique human intelligence.
Yeah, because that connects to what we've often talked about on this show is golfers will shine a very tight spotlight on themselves. Like, how am I doing? Am I swinging correctly today? How am I scoring? And what we've talked about is get outside of yourself, get into your environment, feel the breeze on your face, hear the birds, see the trees. And then you start to experience the world in a different way, and you feel more connected to it. And then I think in that way, then you're more almost in this harmony of your body with the environment around how we're going to propel this little white object to a target.
Yeah, and research suggests that moving the body actually activates mental processes as well. Like you mentioned, people walking on a treadmill while they were working. And this particular study looked at radiologists who are examining slides, looking for abnormalities. And they actually found more abnormalities, more of what they were looking for when they were moving than when they were still. And the reason for that is that when we're moving, that sends a signal to our brains that, like, okay, you're on the move, you're looking for things, you're being aware. When you sit down or when you're still, it's like, okay, now we're at rest. The brain says, now we're at rest. We don't really need to pay very much attention. So your visual acuity actually is heightened when you're moving.
There's been a lot written, and I'm sure you've had discussions about, people's mental states the last 24 months. And isn't it interesting that there's a lot of depression and a lot of people suffering because they have been stuck inside?
Yeah.
They're even though the whole world's on a screen, but their actual physical space has been truncated.
Yeah.
So they're not interacting with other human beings. And there's a part of your work, you talk about the importance of knowing what your teammates know, the environment and the workplace you're in. And look at it, all of us have been stuck at home. We're no longer getting to interact with our tribesmates.
Right.
And it's really had an effect on us internally. I think it's really the cause of a lot of stress and strife.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Howard. And if the brain were all that mattered, then just all of us looking at each other in these little boxes would be fine, right? We'd be okay. But actually, as whole humans, we thrive on moving our bodies, on visiting new and stimulating places, on seeing each other in person. And these are all the things we've been missing out on for the last 2 years. And I think it's really taken a toll.
The book is called, I have it right here. It's called The Extended Mind. And, I just was reading some of the notes on it last night, and it's infinitely interesting. The Extended Mind is Annie Murphy Paul. And it's available where books are. Do people even go into bookstores anymore and actually touch physical books? Just seems so old-fashioned.
Hey, I went to Indigo last week to get a Valentine's Day card, and it went on Friday. I didn't go on Sunday. I went on Friday.
Yeah, well, I listen. I've been in this game a long time. I'm just trying to be like a 10 handicap boyfriend. I bought grocery store flowers the day before because I knew they would be cheaper. Annie, I hope you had a good time. We really love talking to you. And you can sort of see how we thought your work would relate to people in golf, because it's just one of those things, as Tim said, golfers are constantly overthinking, thinking that's the pathway to success, when in actual fact, some of what we do can be taken care of by trusting. Is it really, in the end, is it really about trusting that your physical body has some intelligence?
I like that, Howard. Yeah, trusting, resting in the body, not always letting the brain take the lead, which it really wants to do, but kind of maybe holding back that intellectual faculty and letting the whole body take over.
Yeah, I do think there's something to be said in terms of, we could talk about intuition, or guys like say gut instinct, that there's some wisdom there. And it's done us pretty well since, I guess we were fish and we crawled up onto the beach. But in our culture,
are we going to go back that far?
apparently I did.
That's awesome.
GSL, you're the GSL. Were you back there?
Sure I was. Listen, Annie, I hope you had a good time. We really enjoyed having you on our show. What a pleasure, and all the best to you in America.
Yeah,
we're all in this together.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Annie Murphy.
Take care, Annie.
The book is called The Extended Mind, and you golfers, if you're looking for something to read before it melts. I was fascinated. I know you read her book, Timmy, but I spent a bit of time last night going over some of the notes from the book, and I just found it fascinating, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I as soon as I saw it, I got like the sample thing through Kindle. I went, that ain't enough. I bought the book, and I just love it. And it's really interesting. I think that things are starting to shift a little bit in terms of this awareness, again, as Annie talked about, the wisdom of the body. You just hear it more and more when you're hearing from people, whether it's talking about mindfulness, or just in terms of being a good, say, business leader, is making decisions not from a place of constantly, how are we thinking through this? Is just sitting with it. And as you said, sometimes it's as easy as, something's going on, I'm not quite sure, but I'll go for a walk, or I'll sleep on it. And the next day, or you get home from your walk and go, oh, there it is.
I worked with a comedian who is now, it was a really funny woman named Judy Kroon, and she was in radio with us, and she's become, like a lot of smart people, she leads workshops on the power of humor in daily life. But she's the one that she goes for this walk every day. She says, whenever I'd call her, she'd be on her walk. And she's the one that turned me on to that quote, through walking, all things are solved. And And it really is about movement. And in Annie's book, she does spend quite a bit of time talking about regulating your emotions through activity. And I mean, golfers can relate because I think some golfers can relate because sometimes when you're on a cart, like I have been the 2 rounds I played here, and I'm, I'm fine with it, but I like to get off the cart and walk.
Totally.
When I can. So I played 2 rounds. I want to talk about it in a second, but one of the rounds I was on a cart with somebody else and I had the opportunity to get off the cart and walk to my ball or go do something on my own in between shots. Whereas yesterday I was on a cart by myself. And so I was just whipping along and it changes the experience. You don't feel the earth with your feet as much. You're not, as you said, you're not as aware maybe of wind and conditions. And I just think that, I like walking on, in Toronto when it feels like 40, I don't, but
Yeah.
There's something about feeling the earth with your body that does something different to the experience.
Well, I absolutely. One of the things that you hear from coaches all the time, particularly our good friend Paul Dooland, is the heads up, chest up, or
Eyes up, tits up.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Eyes on the horizon.
exactly. Well, one of the reasons why that's so beneficial is that when we're feeling down or let's say things aren't going well, we start to think, the tendency is to have our eyes down, looking about 3 feet in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you're up and you're looking, you're not thinking as much, and again, you're more apt to be in the environment and feel what's going on. It's really interesting. Sometimes, okay, I remember. I don't know if you know. Do you know Doug Ball, the photographer?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Guy
okay.
From Devil's Pulpit.
Yeah, well, he and I were on a trip together with a bunch of guys to Ireland, and we played Ballybunion, and the old course at Ballybunion, and then we went back, and he was going to photograph it, so we're sort of scouting it. We're just walking around, and I noticed that because I was divorced from thinking about my golf game and if my swing was in the slot, this is before enlightenment.
Yeah, before transformation.
Exactly. Anyways,
before you ascended.
exactly. Well, anyways, so I just remember like standing on these dunes and these fairways and looking around and just like absorbing, and I was experiencing the golf course in a more vibrant way. I was just more appreciative of what I was seeing and experiencing. And that's when I started to really understand that if I get outside of myself in this chronic self-absorption about how I'm doing and am I doing it right, and if I get out there, then I just feel better and I actually play better.
It's interesting you say that because on the 16th hole of the Pete Dye Dunes course yesterday, I was playing with 3 other people, and none
I still
of them
hate
were.
you right now.
Thank you.
I'm just jealous.
But so all I was playing with 3 other players, not golfers. They were but very avid players. As I said to Rachel, if you're playing that golf course yesterday, it was very expensive, and I won't play it again. But I enjoyed it. And my point is, so there's a lovely couple from Saskatchewan and a guy from Colorado. Nice, just a great group. We had a lovely time. And on the 16th hole of this course, which is right up against this rock, this huge mountain, and it was just amazing. And the woman that we were playing with, nice golfer, probably a 15, 18 handicap, but got herself around the course. She had her worst hole literally of the round, like didn't play it very well, but because of the scenery, she said, and I love this, she goes, this is my favorite hole on the course.
Fantastic.
And I love that because it had nothing to do with how she played it. It was just the most visually stunning backdrop. And I'm not much for taking pictures on the course, but it was one of those things where it's so different than what we normally see in our golf and on, Southern Ontario. It was mesmerizing.
Yeah.
But I took note of the fact that she enjoyed the hole for reasons other than how many sticks, stick and balls she hit down the fairway. And I thought, what a great commentary on what's really going on in this environment. I would tell you that, I've played a couple rounds here and I had some decent scores, but mostly I spent a good amount of time just looking around because it's, for me, from the prairies, I'm not used to seeing this. And so I've really taken in the environment and also try to have some gratitude around the fact that I'm able to do my show down here. I'm here for the month. It's great. But I just thought that was interesting that her enjoyment of the whole had more to do with how it looked and how it felt and not the score.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is that's what this amazing game offers, is you can have incredible experiences with the environment, with the people you're with, and what's going on, rather than this, blinkered focus on can I make par here?
Yeah, and I've had two experiences down here with lots of people that, they're avid players. They're here for a reason. The group I played with on Sunday, actually, one of our listeners, Grant McDougall from New Brunswick, is a guy that was interested in Decade. We had one conversation, and this is what I love about the game. He and I have had one conversation about Decade. Hold on a second, sorry. No, there it is. We had one conversation, and from our conversation, he set me up with a guy that he met through golf, and this guy hosted me, meaning hosted. He took me out for a round, never met me. And I got in with his group on Sunday at his course down here, and it was him and two of his buddies. And the first thing I learned from my cartmate is this guy is a retired airline captain, so I couldn't have been happier.
Oh, exactly.
It was unbelievable. I had 18 holes sitting next to a guy that flew Big Ten, as we say, and I was just, at one point I said, "Are you tired of me asking you flying questions?" He goes, No, go ahead. But we had a great time. Now, these guys, because they know this fellow Grant, they knew I was a golfer, and they asked, and they've listened to our podcast. But the enjoyment of the round with these guys in particular had less to do with the scores we were shooting. In fact, I didn't even really notice didn't really know if these guys took note of what I shot until the end, and they asked me what my number was, and I told them. They were like, "Oh yeah, it looks like you're whatever." But my point is, it was enjoyable for other reasons other than just being able to play golf in February for me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, you reminded me, a couple of years ago, a friend set me up to play with a couple of his buddies, and one of his buddies was the bass player in the Forgotten Rebels.
Okay,
Exactly.
I'm not familiar. They're so forgotten. I've never heard of them.
No, they were a Canadian punk band that achieved some degree of notoriety with punk fans, but he also because the bass player for Teenage Head had some kind of criminal record. When Teenage Head would tour in the States, he would play bass for them. The point is, just like you, I met this guy who played at Burlington, and by the end of the front nine, I said something similar. Are you tired of me asking you questions about playing bass?
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, by the way, for you people that are Forgotten Rebels fans, here's their big hit, High School Hookers. Hang on. Here we go. Am I not allowed to play this? Oh, here we go. Here's a little Forgotten Rebels.
Sweet harmony.
Yeah, man. I could see your band covering this. There we go. Look at you, O'Connor.
Keep your hands on your money. The nose is getting runny.
I got a chance to play a couple rounds. I don't know if I should tell you what I shot, because people go, "Really? Is that what you shot?"
Well, let me ask you this. You hadn't been outside on green grass,
right,
hitting a ball. So how was it in terms of getting your swing back? I don't know, getting it back or accessing it or anything like that.
Well, I had hit some balls over the winter. I've worked a lot on my fitness. And
that's right, with Bamalam Brooke Benning.
Bamalam Brooke Benning. In fact, I work out with Brooke a couple hours from now. I hadn't hit a ton of balls, but I'd hit enough to stay somewhat current, although, my golf muscles are still kind of coming back. So I play on Sunday, haven't played a round of golf in a couple of months. And it's interesting you asked that question, because I wanted to have this conversation that what didn't go away is my ability or my cognizance, if you will, about the strategy of golf. So on Sunday with these guys, never seen the golf course before, and I'll just tell you, it wasn't the most difficult sort of course I've played, but it was like 6,100 yards, and there's it's hard enough. I shot 73, and nice. I made no three putts. I had no double bogeys. I had two bogeys. I bogeyed the first hole, so my first hole back to golf. I made a 5 on a par 4. I had two bogeys, one birdie, and shot one over. Didn't sink anything really. I made, like I say, I only made one birdie. I was very conservative. I sort of I put my money where my mouth is. There was I'll give you an example, 520-yard par 5. And these guys all hit driver off the tee. Now, I get on the tee, and I'm like, I'll probably just hit, by the way, the TaylorMade clubs. I'm just going to pivot here for a second.
Yeah.
I hit I hit 3-wood off the tee, and they're like sort of wondering why I'm not hitting driver. And I say, because I can't hit this. All I could see is out of bounds and a pretty narrow fairway and the green way in the distance, and it's uphill. I got no chance to hit this in 2. No way. Certainly not in February. I mean, maybe if it was downwind and the fairways were hard, maybe. So I get up, I hit my 3-wood, then I hit a 6-iron, then I hit a wedge, and then I birdie the hole. So that was the only hole I birdied. My point is, what didn't go to sleep over the winter is my belief in playing aggressively conservative. So that hole, my job was to not get a penalty by hitting an OB with my driver, which I'm still getting used to. Although I hit some drives yesterday that were pretty gross. I mean, like pretty good. But
as the kids say, gross.
Oh yeah, it was pretty good. I'll tell you. But my point is, I've had 2 rounds. I shot 73. The first round I shot 75 yesterday. The difference in the round yesterday was a little bit more of a difficult course, very windy, but I had a 3-putt, I had a double bogey, and I had a penalty shot. Now I had 4, so I had. I was 4 over on those, 1 over. So I shoot 75, and it was a good score because I wasn't, I got it. Pete Dye's it's a tough golf course.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And there's water everywhere, but I basically was 1 under for the last 10 holes. So once I kind of got into the rhythm of the day, I played pretty nicely. But the point of all this is not to show you how good I am, but to show you how that thinking about golf, the strategy around golf never has to go away. I never, I made a double bogey on a hole yesterday because I hit it in the water. I was aimed way further right than I thought I was. And it was Pete Dye. There's not a lot of margin for errors on some of his par 3s. But for the most part, I just kept it in play. I sort of dinked it around and just kind of conserved strokes. I didn't do anything special. I didn't make that many great shots, and I didn't make a birdie until the very last hole of the round. Like, I played with 3 people who all had handicaps in the 15 to 8, and they'd all had birdies. One guy chipped in, Denise chipped in, you know what I mean? And I was like, literally, I was thinking on the last hole, I had like a 10-foot putt. I'm like, I have not made a birdie yet. I'm like, I'm the only, I'm a
When's
scratch.
my turn? When's my turn?
I did. I was literally thinking, I hope I make this because I'm the only one that hasn't made a birdie in this group. And then I was lucky enough for it to go in. The takeaway for me, though, is that the things I've been working on, the things that we talk about, the strategy around golf, it doesn't matter if you're in, mid-season form. My brain was in mid-season form. My ideas around, not too chipping and not, being very conservative. I had a bunker shot yesterday, a longer one, and rather than try and fire it at the pin, which was sitting up on a sort of a mound in the middle of the green, I fired away from it, just thinking, okay, I'll take the 10-footer here, and I'm not going to try and go for this because if it comes down this hill, I'm going to go off the green.
Yep.
So those kind of things are a constant in my game. I could have hit it a little bit better, but for the most part, I just was good at conserving mistakes.
Yeah, and what I love about it, great stuff. I'm glad you're having fun, man. That's great. And I love the fact you can come out of the snow, plates of rust falling off and still get the ball around. But I think it underscores something we've been talking about in this year of decade is that when you make good decisions, it takes the pressure off your ball hitting, as you say. Yeah. And I think, and to connect to our conversation with Annie, when you make good decisions and you connect it to how you're feeling in your body, you tend to make pretty good shots because your body's in a place of it's comfortable. It makes sense. You just things feel better. It's kind of like all the little keys mesh together more nicely than when you're trying to say, force some shot in there or something that's goes against your normal shot pattern, and you think, oh yeah, I need to fade this into this back right pin or something. You just hit your shot and you just feel more comfortable. So I love how that all just flows together really nicely.
It was also an opportunity because the group I played with on Sunday, those were more of sort of, I would say, in the 10 to 15 handicap category. Those are the guys that shoot in the low to mid 80s, high 80s. But the guys I played, it was interesting. So they were interesting to me to watch how they strategize golf. But the group I was in yesterday, that was more of your classic golfers. So we get to the 14th or 15th hole, and it's a 130-yard par 3, Pete Dye course. So there's water usually on the par 3s. And I get up there because I've already hit one ball in the water on a par 3 in the front 9. And part of it was, I don't know that I had enough clubs. So what I do when I come back to the game in the spring is I clubbed up. So I have 130 yards to a sort of frontish pin. That's around my pitching wedge, but I take a 9-iron. And of the 4 of us in the group, I'm the only one that hits the green. The other 2 gentlemen hit 6 balls in the water between the 2 of them. And because the one guy just wouldn't give up. And I said, hey, have fun, fill your boots. We're having a nice time. Go crazy. The young woman we played with, she's in her, I don't know, she's probably in her early 40s. But she sort of hit it to the right. But what I can tell you is those guys were not hitting enough club. It's a simple thing, but if they had hit enough club there, because they all missed it just short.
Yep.
And I sort of
you can't miss it.
Well, the only place you can't miss it is there's water all the way to the hole. So, and I don't know what they hit, but I guarantee you it was 1 club less than they should have. So that's a strategy mistake, and they think of it as a golf swing mistake. It's like Fawcett said. A lot of people will have a bad putting round and go practice their stroke, thinking there's something wrong with the way they're moving the putt or the putter. When in reality, it's usually it's the weight of your putts. It's not your strokes. Mostly fine. As my buddy Henrik says, if you've got a 20-foot putt, you're not likely to aim 5 feet right or 5 feet left, but you are going to miss it long and short more often than not. So those are all things that it's been interesting for me to see people, in that handicap sort of range, and the mistakes they make, they think are physical, but actually they're all sort of strategic and mental.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our friend, we haven't had him on for a while, but Richard Zokol, he talked about there's kind of 2 key elements to golf: assessment and execution. So, but if you don't get the assessment part right or mostly right, the execution part in many ways doesn't matter. I think we've all been there. We've absolutely, say, flushed a 5-iron. Whoa, I couldn't hit that any better. And it soars over the green. Well, I guess you didn't make a very good assessment.
No, that's really, really key. What you just said there, I'd forgotten. Yeah, assessment and execution. And a lot of golfers think it's their inability to execute, when in actual fact, it was there's a strategy breakdown. Hey, before
to me, that takes it back to just to tie it up in a bow here, if you will, as I'm wont to do. It comes back to what you were saying, and this thing that we explored a lot of last year it's around making good decisions, making them from a place of emotional neutrality. Instead of what are the guys going to think if I hit a hybrid off this tee rather than a driver, or what's the right thing to do here? It's more of a thing. What's going to help me make a good score? How am I going to feel comfortable? What's going to fit in here? Rather than as Annie was talking about, all this thinking that we tend to do.
I couldn't agree with you more. There really is, especially around men and the culture of golf, there is this sort of somewhat, I don't know, ordained correct way to do things. And in actual fact, there's a range of physical, like trying to make a golf swing against the better players or the tour players. Like most of us can't make that motion consistently. So whatever motion you have, for better or worse, it's not what's holding most of us back. It's what you just said. It's our assessment is where we break down, and our execution is our bad execution. I'll finish this by saying, to your point, bad execution is based on poor assessment.
Exactly. And I think that you can draw, and that's what I love about golf, is that so much as you can draw this out to the rest of your life. You look at people who've done things, say, a little bit differently.
Yes.
They weren't locked into a way of doing things, or it might be weird, or what will people judge? No, they do things their way, and they break out of the pack.
Yes.
Steve Jobs, people were designing phones, focus groups, all that kind of stuff. We went, no, we're going to do it we're going to do it this way. And you just see it, like Don Cherry, I don't know, he broke the mold in terms of, the typical self-deprecating Canadian who kind of humble and whatnot. No, he was loud and what, he was himself.
Yeah.
He didn't care what people would think.
He was authentic.
He was his authentic self. And I think that's a lot of kind of what, and you can extend that from golf to all parts of the rest of your life. Who's the real you in there, rather than the being careful? Does it line up with what everyone else is doing? And God forbid, what will people think of me?
Yeah, you're going to love this. I read that this is a quote from I don't want to get into it now, but I've met somebody down here that is. Let me just put it this way. You'll love this. He's like Sheds. He's just a bit off the grid.
Shed, you mean?
Mark, yeah. He's this guy.
Yeah.
This guy that I've met and I'm going to go see, he's a little bit off the grid. And this is what I love. And he's got a quote. I won't tell you his name now because maybe in subsequent shows we'll have him on. But he's got a quote. He says, "Different isn't always better, but better is always different."
Wow, that's awesome. Can you say that one more time, please?
Different isn't always better, but better is always different. And you
love that.
And
that's meme material.
Well, yeah, and whether you're talking about Fawcett, or Zokel with his headphones, or Mo Norman, or Don Cherry, or Steve Jobs. I was reminded, everyone's gets excited about the Super Bowl commercials, right? And we think, most of us can't remember how long has a Super Bowl commercial been a thing. But the guy that did the very first sort of extravagant, expensive Super Bowl commercial? Steve Jobs, 1984. Wow. 1984, Steve Jobs did that 2-minute, or the Apple did a 2-minute 1984 sort of takeoff from the book. And that started this whole, so up until then, Super Bowl commercials were just like any other commercials. The point being is that better is always comes from different, and in our case, maybe, in my case last summer, better came from a different way of thinking about golf. And, I think sometimes, and I know you and I talk off the air about our golf swings. I love, I've said this before, we could have done 187 shows about the golf swing, and I would have loved it. I love dicking around with it. I experiment. I fool around the range. I try different things. I just don't do that when I'm playing anymore. I used to. I used to be so, I don't know. I got so frustrated because I couldn't execute this thing I was trying to do that seemed to work on the range. Did you hear that quote from Hank Haney this week?
No.
This will be such a comfort to most golfers. It was to me. Haney was on the podcast with Drew Stoltz and Colt Knost. I love this podcast.
What's the podcast called?
You know what? It's great. They do a show called Gravy and the Sleaze on PGA Tour Radio, but I don't know the name of their podcast. But Haney was on there, and he said, of all the players he's ever worked with, the guy that was the worst at taking his game from the range to the course was Tiger fucking Woods. And I was like, what? and those guys were like, what? And he said, yeah, I'm going to tell you guys, I've never seen anyone flush it on the range better than Tiger. And he would go to the course, and he was sort of, it would be a version of that, but it wouldn't be his range game.
Wow.
And that was why he was such a good player, because Tiger recognized that he couldn't take that flushing range game to the course, but he could take a version of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And he made such good decisions. It's like Fawcett said.
He made good decisions.
Yeah, like Fawcett, one of the things that people may not know, and we learned that in that initial seminar that we went to of Fawcett's 4 years or so ago, that he analyzed every shot that Tiger took over 9 years on the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
And the key takeaway was that Tiger never, or very rarely, ever hit the ball to a place that would put him in trouble. He just course managed the place to death. Yep. So he wouldn't shoot lots of 62s and 60 occasionally, but he'd 67 and 68 you to death. Yeah. Because he just made so many good decisions. So I think we're connecting to is that, you could, that flush shot that just is dead at the target to that little 3 foot area at the front of the green. But no, Tiger would hit the shot that would be the full, given the largest margin for error. It's going to find terra firma and leave him with an easy birdie putt.
Tiger, there's so many times I remember watching him where, he'd be struggling and you'd think, well, surely he's going to have a high number today, but he would just, and then the announcers always put it down to like, oh, he's got such fierce determination, etc. Tiger just had a plan to never, how do I put this? Tiger wanted to conserve every stroke he could. Everywhere on the golf course, no matter what the situation, Tiger looked for the way to make the lowest score from where he was. And that's why so many of those rounds, it looked like he was going to shoot 1,000,000. He'd shoot 71 or 72 or have a 2 under for the last 4 holes finish because it's not that he just would never give up, is that Tiger stood for the lowest scores he could shoot on any given day. Listen, at the end of I made a double on the 8th hole yesterday. And that put me 4 over for the round. And it was par 72, but it's 37-35. So I was actually 1 under on the back 9. I birdied that last hole. But I'm 4 over after 8. And I know, it's a fun round, but I'm also aware of what I am. And I double bogeyed the 8th hole. And I stood on the 9th hole, which was a par 5. And, sort of a shortish par 5. But I thought to myself, okay, let's see how you can do from here to the end of the round. Because I was a bit scrappy and I wasn't quite in my rhythm. I said, let's just go back to the basics of what we do, which is let's find some fairways, let's find some greens, and see how that manifests itself. Not that I wasn't trying to do that before, but I sort of reconfigured, okay, my goal now is to conserve as many strokes as I can. I didn't know what I was going to shoot. I'm 4 over for the round. Not a great, I basically bogeyed half the holes. And just that mindset of conserving stroke, not trying to, I need 7 birdies. I just did what I normally do, which is don't make a lot of mistakes, made no more bogeys, made no more doubles, only made 1 birdie. It's not like I went on a birdie run. I just kind of went on a run of fairly boring golf, But that's kind of how most golf, most low scores are from very sort of, kind of not that flashy at golf. I didn't hit any. I hit a couple of good shots, but not crazy good,
Yeah, well, we've said it often on this podcast is that you want to lower your scores is not from all the birdies you make. It's from getting rid of all the others and the dumb bogeys you make.
I wanted to give you a chance because I know you brought this up in the pre-show meeting about, and I read about it, but I didn't see much of it. The fans at the Phoenix tournament, I know they went crazy. A couple guys got holes in one. What was your takeaway from all of that?
Well, initially when I forget who the fellow was who's made the ace on 16 there, and the fans went nuts. I thought that was so awesome. Like, and you see this beer, the spray of beer going wild and everyone, and then Harry Higgs the next day, the shirt up, and oh my God, that was just so awesome. And then Justin Thomas chips in, and then I saw like the beer cans going flying. I'm thinking like, holy cow, if you get one of those in the head, I know they're aluminum, but if there's 12 ounces of beer in that becomes a projectile.
Sure.
So, I love the fact that it's this party central and it's so ungolf in terms of people going ape shit and having fun and going crazy and the shirts and all that stuff. But it was interesting as the week went on, people started to say, yeah, that was great, but maybe we got to rein this in just a little bit. So I don't know, maybe you just give people beer in plastic cups or something. But
I saw a little bit of debate on both sides of it. And again, not having watched any of it, I'm not I don't mind that 16th hole. I think it's become, a lot of guys on Twitter, golf Twitter, were talking about every tournament should have a hole like that. And maybe it should. I mean, if golf's like any other sport, baseball, football, they've all been struggling to attract a younger crowd that basketball has, that soccer is getting.
Yeah.
And, with golf now under, attack from other rival leagues, the Super Golf League, some interesting stuff there. Yeah. Reading, Phil Mickelson recently, and there's a book coming out where Phil's saying, I'm not really going to go there. I'm just saying these things to gain leverage. There's a lot of stuff going on in golf, but we have a problem. You and I are 127 years old between us. So, of course, we might have an eye toward a more traditional feel to it. But I think your point's a good one. As long as maybe people shouldn't be throwing, things that could hurt other people. But the idea of them celebrating, I thought was, I guess, cool,
I thought it was amazing. I loved it. I love the fact that golf, people have that feel that they can do that. I think that's one of the things that interesting. One of the conversations that people who lead golf organizations were saying, okay, the silver lining of COVID is that it boosted golf in terms of participation. Yes. So how do we hang on to these people? And I think part of it is, how about a very novel concept that golf could be fun?
Yeah.
And you could enjoy yourself. And let's not be so concerned about doing things the right way and making sure that certain things happen because that's the way it's always been done. Mm-hmm. I always tuck my shirt in. I have my hat going forward. Yeah. That's always kind of been the golf uniform, but if somebody wants to have their shirt out, fine. Really?
Because two of the other two men in my group yesterday both had their shirt untucked. One of the guys had his hat on backwards the entire round. I'm like you. My golf uniform is always shirt tucked in, hat forward. But I didn't care. I mean, it didn't bother me. I didn't think it was disrespectful. And the fact that we're all playing, the problem with the course yesterday is it's very expensive. I found a few cheaper places to play. But one thing about a golf course like that, the people that you're going to play with are golfers, because no one's going to spend that kind of money for funsies. You know what I mean? That being said, they were very respectful of the game. One of the things about meeting people, for the first time, and again, I knew that I was going to meet people that were golfers because no one's going to spend that money. But the pace of play was great. Everyone knew where to go. We all speak the same golf language. Can I get the pin? Great shot. All that stuff is there. Within 30 seconds of meeting these people, I knew we'd be fine because we're just golfers. As soon as, it's a weird experience, because as soon as you or I take a swing, they know it's not like a regular, I'm going to sound like a dick, but you know what I mean? Like, I take a swing and they know it's something different, because they don't swing a club like I do. But I'm also the most, I try and be generous, and I try and forget, forget about my game. How are you playing? And I just, I just enjoy the experience. Rachel asked me, she goes, are you ever nervous, or is there any trepidation when you go to the first tee and you're going to meet a new bunch of people? I said, not really, because wherever you go in the world, they're just other golfers. So I guess my point is, as long as you do that, as long as you do the game of golf etiquette wise, and you know where to go, I don't care how you're dressed, really. You know, maybe
Exactly.
not.
I love the way you brought that back, because it's all about sharing in this love of the game.
Exactly.
You know, and if you're not, you know, really, jingling change while someone's trying to make a 3-footer,
Yeah.
or you got your speaker in your cart, and suddenly it's Def Leppard, and some guy was a fan of them in the 80s, and like,
No.
crank this up while you're trying to hit a drive.
Like, I don't want to come to the first tee and see you dressed in a sombrero and overalls with no shirt on. I mean, that would be okay. Excuse me, Jorge. And say, by the way, we should have a talk. I don't know if we're kind of running out of time, but someday we should talk about music on the golf course, because it came up yesterday.
Oh yeah.
At some point in the back nine, one of the people said, "Oh, I normally play music, but my speakers needs to be charged." And she said to me, "What about you?" I said, again, I was talking about being sort of an older guy, and it was not part of my world. And I said, the problem is at my course, guys always kid me. They go, "Oh, Howard doesn't like music." I'm like, no, Howard just doesn't like your music. How about that? I don't, because of what you just said, I don't want to hear Def Leppard and your 80s hair band playlist while I'm trying to sink a 4-footer. A soft music playing in the background in your cart away from me. Part of it,
a little Steely Dan, maybe some reggae.
Dan, it's fine. But my problem is
Something with some flow.
My brain starts to concentrate on the song.
Oh.
And I start. So if I'm over the ball, and I just basically have a rule with my buddies, if they want to play music, just don't be near me when I'm hitting. And if you are, turn it down, because my mind wanders to that over the ball, which may or not, that's that sensation.
That's interesting. And so it fits into sort of the overall theme that we've just sort of happened into. I remember Ben Kern, director of golf at the Nash for years, and then Devil's Pulpit. He had a pretty good guideline. And he said that your conversation should never be heard outside of your fairway. And I think it's the same thing with music. Just keep it to a thing. So it's just keep it to a thing where like you can enjoy it and just be cognizant of other people. That's what I think that golf etiquette is about. That's why in the day, if you were tending the flag, no one does that anymore. But when you would tend the flag, aka hold it, if it was windy, you'd hang on to the flag to stop it from flapping around.
Yep.
That's why you don't stand on a tee directly on a target line behind someone, because you're going to be in the peripheral vision.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole idea is to help other people have fun and not, impose yourself on other people. And that creates fun. So to me, that's what golf is largely about. So if we can sort of have this happy medium of, the way you dress and all that stuff and then that's great. But it's not a game where, in my experience, where we're yelling and screaming while someone's hitting a ball. No. Or it's a screaming guitar solo.
That's right. You made me think of something. I don't know if I've ever told this story. I'll tell it to you very quickly. My father, a very stoic man, not a super, wasn't a super chuckle fest with Lou Glassman. And he was very strict about me learning the etiquette of the game before he would let me play it. I caddied for my dad and his friends a few times, and I showed me where to stand, where to put the clubs on the tee side of the green, so that it makes sense. So when you're finished putting, you're not going back 20 yards toward the fairway. You're picking up your clubs on your way to the next hole. All the things that keep the flow of the game. Yeah. Like my group yesterday, all of them understood that. They knew where to drive. They knew where to go. And that's so a guy at my level can play with, you can play with anyone, because if they know that stuff. So one day my dad didn't swear very much either, certainly not in front of me. I might have been 12 or 13, and I'm holding the flag while my dad's putting, and he's taking a little extra time. It's along like a 35-footer. And I start to just, I don't know why, I start to distractedly, I get bored. I start going waka, waka, waka with the flag, just kind of like holding it and pulling it back and forth, and it's going waka, 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 like this. Like a kid, right? And my dad finally gets frustrated. He goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he said it in such a way We were both surprised. So I was so surprised he said it out loud, and he was surprised he said it out loud. And I'm like, and that was like the first time I'd ever heard my dad say the F word. It was wild.
Oh, that's great. Just one point I want to make before I say goodbye. Resort golf or travel golf, if you will, is wonderful. When I was writing about golf in the 90s, and I would be, I'd be going trips everywhere. I went to, La Casa, I played golf in France, Florida. I'd go on these places, and often I'd take Sandy. And of course, I'd be paired up with people all the time. And it was like really like 99.5% of the time, you had a great time. These were golfers. It was all about just having a good time together, enjoying the game of golf. Like you said, they know the etiquette. They know the things to do in terms of keeping pace. You write your score down on the next tee, etc. But it was almost like universal that you met nice people. Mm-hmm. It was really rare that you'd meet like a real dickwad.
No, I totally agree. And I said that to Rachel too. I've played golf, maybe not all over the world, but in a lot of different countries, certainly all over the States and in Europe. I've been to Scotland, and it's just this, it's a language that we all have in common. Before we finish, Rudra, one of our regular fans, Rudra Rishi Maharaj, sent me a note. How are the new clubs in real course play? Going to a simulator tonight to try them out. He's got, I'm not sure what his irons are, but he ordered the Stealth driver.
Oh, sweet.
And I got to use it for the first time. I've hit balls a couple times. There's a range about 15 minutes from the house here. And, I go there. Last week it was so, I'm sorry, everybody. It was so hot last week. It was ridiculous. And I will tell you, I hit a drive yesterday. I've hit a couple with the new Stealth that they're just great.
A 62-year-old man should not hit it that far.
One in particular was when I got to the ball, because the carts yesterday have the super GPS screens, and I was like, "Is this right?" Because it said my drive was like 285, and I was like, "What?" Because it didn't feel. I mean, I made a good swing, and I thought I hit it well, but I didn't think I hit it that well, and that's what I would say. I'm not telling you that these clubs can give you they're not miracle, workers. They're just. But I would say this: there were a couple drives I've had that went further than I felt they deserved to. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, they weren't way downhill, downwind. It was just, I'd hit it solid, and I got up, and I was a little bit like, this is a bit further than I thought it was going to end up. So I will just say that. And the irons are amazing. The irons are very similar to the 790s that I've had the last couple of years that you have. They look a little different. And, but I love the 7. And I'll just say this. If you love TaylorMade, you're going to love these clubs. If you're already using them, it's more of the same and better. So, and as far as the carbon face of the driver, it sounds great. It feels cool. And, like I said, I can't tell you much about my misses because I've had a bunch of them, but, I certainly hit a couple that were pretty cool. Pretty good.
Yeah, I'm having a good time with my new P790s and my Stealth driver at the Office Golf in the south of Guelph. They've got two really nice simulators there, and maybe we can talk about how you can learn from using these launch monitors and all that, because it's been amazing for me. I've come to such a better understanding of club face angle and swing path and the difference that makes in shot shape and everything. And so it's been really fun because to be able to spend some more time and knowing what those numbers really mean and how that translates into feel and all that kind of thing. But what the hell was I going to say? Oh, I love the well, at a certain age, right?
No. The two of us have been doing this show. It's like 73 minutes now. We're both tired.
What have you just been talking? It's not like, it's not like you did weightlifting or anything.
There's so much thinking.
And it's so tiring. No, I love the sound of the driver and, distance, yardage. You don't know. I think launch monitor numbers in terms of carry and roll, I don't think you can read a ton into that, but I'm hitting it pretty solid.
Yeah.
But there's something there's an auditory thing that's going on that I love.
I like it. Listen, I'm the same. I guess some of my numbers, I was at Casey's place a couple times at Burl Oak Indoor, and some of my numbers indoors are just ridiculous. And not that I don't believe them, but I would say that to Casey. I go, is that real? But remember, you're hitting it off a perfect lie.
Exactly.
I think my swing.
No wind.
No, nothing. No, actually, back to our guest today. No external information.
That's right.
And with nothing on the line, I think I swing 5 miles an hour faster, or some version of faster, because there's no consequence to it other than that screen that's 10 feet away from me. I will say this. I took a couple hours of one of our pros times, Dave Lambert from Glen Cairn, and I booked a TrackMan session. And I went through my bag outdoors. I spent a couple hours going through every club and writing down average distances and max distances. And that launch monitor really helped me out of doors because I'll just say this, the numbers were more realistic because there is a visual consequence. Even though you're on the range, you're trying to move the ball through the air. And I think that alone does something to my speed. Again, that being said, I did hit it a couple of times it turned out longer than I thought it was going to be. But you make the point, and I said it too, like there's an auditory satisfaction to the stealth that is definitely something that I think people should experience. Thanks to Annie Murphy Paul. Thanks to you for setting that up. That was just amazing. Thanks to TaylorMade Golf. Thanks to Jonathon Wong Apparel. Tim O'Connor, o'connorgolf.ca. Coach Tim available for all your coaching needs, parties, bar mitzvahs, weddings.
And you're available for decade coaching.
Oh, that's right. I've got a very small group that I've put together of decade devotees, but I'm happy to have a conversation. Listen, I've had lots of chats with people, not that have procured my, services, but just talking about decade and as a possible concept for you. Anyway, kids, for the Humble and Fred Show listeners, we're off on Monday, February 21st, because we respect the family too much to work on Family Day. And Tim and I will be back in a couple of weeks.
All right. See ya.
Competition in other places.